go back if you would and tell me about first how you applied STAA and how the whole
hmm
award thing came about.
Yeah, so I applied first in 2014, and then ended up obviously winning in 2015, and obviously a cool thing for young broadcasters to be able to be judged like that. So it was right at the end of my senior year. I remember being at the ballpark when I got the I think John called me. So yeah, I mean, it was a pretty cool thing, and nice to be acknowledged and have some acknowledgement like that. And obviously kicked off a lot of fun down in North Carolina for the weekend. But yeah, it was just a cool thing, a nice acknowledgement at the end of your time where you're kind of going off into the unknowns. It's nice to have a little reassurance that perhaps things are going to be okay.
Oh, it's also nice to have that Jim Nantz Award winner on your resume.
Yes, yes,
Did that help you?
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's hard to know, but I'm sure it definitely, especially right after the fact, and I'd say like in the year following, I definitely heard it, and then a bunch, and then it sort of come up through time as well, where there'd be certain times where it's like, oh, did you win that thing, or oh, did you? Someone had heard of it, and I'm sure having Jim Nance's name on it doesn't hurt when having it as a memorable thing. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have heard it talking to some people through the years for sure.
So then, John calls you and says, "Hey, guess what? You get to go to
hmm
Salisbury, North Carolina for this awards weekend." Did you have any idea what it would be like before you got?
No, not right away. I mean, I talked to some people who had gone before I led up to it, and in the month, whatever it was leading up to it, and so had a little bit of an idea. And it was nice to have a few friends who I knew were going to be there, that I kind of felt like were my hosts, driving me around to certain places that they had been there before through the years. And I wasn't there the first day because I was in season, but I was there the last 2 days, and certainly for the banquet, which was really exciting. But yeah, so I had a little bit of an idea going in, but not to the level that it was, and how special the night itself was. Certainly not. You get it a little bit when you go to school at Syracuse, because you'll have some people come through, but it's certainly not always at the same time, all kind of in the same room. My lasting memory was it was getting to spend some time afterwards talking to Bill Raftery's wife for I think like 45 minutes in the hotel, and just so random connections like that, and people you've watched, and that certainly stands out as memorable. But it's quite a room. It was quite a scene to kind of just walk in there, and sort of be a little bit overwhelmed, and why exactly am I here, and then let alone to go up and speak in front of it is certainly a whole nother ball game.
I'm glad you brought that up because for my money, I was extremely impressed with how poised you were, how cool you were. Was that on the outside or the inside?
No, I think it was. I remember being a little bit. I remember being surprised how early it was in the night, if I recall correctly. I don't think I expected it quite as early on. So I think it was one of the first two things or something like that. So I was hoping I was going to, hear a little bit of what people had to say, and about how long they spoke, so I would have a little bit of a better idea. But it did happen pretty early on when John went up there. And so, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely nervous. And then you try your best not to think about the people who are in the room specifically that are there. But I remember that right after I was done, Sean McDonough came up to me and was like, "Really nice job," and that sort of put me at ease, make sure I had done okay. So that was a nice thing that I remember.
How many members of the Newhouse Mafia were there that
There were certainly a few. I remember. I'm gonna forget some. It's been a few years, but I remember specifically Matt Martucci and John Nicholson, former professor, were the ones that were kind of everywhere I went. They were sort of helping drive me around and tell me where to go. And I remember spending a lot of time with them. And obviously, I'd had John Nicholson as a professor before, but I don't think I had met Matt until that weekend. But so yeah, so I certainly remember those two. And Ian was there, and Ian Eagle and Sean McDonough were down there, and Dan Horde, and I'm certainly there were a bunch more as well that are escaping. I mean, obviously, as you know, there's just so many people who go every year.
it gets a little obnoxious at times. As a Newhouse alum, I can say that.
Sure.
And you went that day. You went to we now call it the summit, Sports Media Convergence Summit, the seminars. What was that like?
It was a lot of fun. I remember my first thought was, I wish I was playing golf like everybody else, but not everybody else, but a bunch of others. But it was a lot of fun, and it was interesting, and it was nice to have a balance, and especially in North Carolina where a lot of things are based, that we had some broadcasters, but then there were also some producers and some executive producers, and some advice on things specifically they were looking for. So it was not just about the craft of play-by-play and of broadcasting, but there was some other advice as well that made it kind of a really good mixture of things and made it a useful weekend and a useful seminar too.
So now take us through. That's over. You're doing baseball, correct? That's
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So take us through your life since then, or your career since then.
Well, I remember specifically the most important thing was figuring out how to get the trophy home, because I flew from North Carolina to Toledo, Ohio, joining a team on the road. So there was some difficulty in getting the trophy on the bus and making sure that nothing happened to the trophy. But eventually we did get it home. So, I did a bunch of years of minor league baseball, and now I'm in the Boston area and do a lot of stuff with. Kind of amazing how the industry has changed even in just a couple of years since then, and now this whole ACC network thing specifically for me, which didn't exist then at all, or was just starting to, I guess I should say, with some of the ACC schools at least specifically. But here, in the Boston area, and doing a lot of stuff at Boston College and Harvard, and some freelance stuff with the Ivy League, and some different things here or there. So kind of just still, working through the grind, as so many of us kind of go through at the beginning stages here. And this sort of weird break we're all experiencing, and as part of this much larger health crisis, has actually not been the worst pause in the world to kind of go back and so much of, even specifically that seminar was about watch your stuff back, and in a perfect world you would do that, but sometimes there's not always the time to do that depending on how much you're working. So it actually was nice to be able to sit down here these last few days and go back and watch some old stuff and be able to kind of critique it with a more critical eye and spending more time on it. So that's kind of what we've been up to.
I was talking to Wes Durham, who's actually, it was his idea that we, present this award at our banquet. Talked to him a little bit earlier. He said he's gone back and looked at how he organizes all his prep work for games.
Yeah, I know. There's definitely, it's sort of, even when we're not specifically working or specifically prepping, you still have your laptop in front, you're looking something up, and it's kind of constant. So it's been a weird stoppage of time here, as I know so many people are going through. But yeah, it's been nice to take a little break here and be able to go back and evaluate how we do some things and see if there's ways to be more efficient going forward.
You're kind of in the generation that came up with social media. How do you use it in what you do?
I probably don't use it quite as much as some other people who, in terms of putting myself out there, which is probably something I need to work on, but and probably is a good lesson, because it's interesting to kind of look at and see how some people use it, and that's certainly something that I want to be a little bit better at and improve at. But I just think of like as a source of news, not so much news in terms of what we're dealing with in the world, but even just, you can go so far through Twitter specifically to get, information on different, even sports you wouldn't necessarily think have that much of a Twitter, presence. There's, especially this year where I've really the last 2 years done a lot of college hockey games at Boston College, and especially this year. And there were so many different ways that just being on Twitter and creating some lists, and that bringing in some articles that I don't think I would have seen otherwise, and being able to dive a little bit deeper and have more prep. And I think, there's so much at our fingertips to be able to find, and social media, it can lead you in some of those directions. And, that certainly is a useful tool in terms of getting ready for shows.
How many different sports have you done play-by-play for?
Well, that's the beauty of working at Harvard. You certainly get a lot because Harvard has pretty much everything. So, any kind of done a bunch of water polo at Harvard and rugby and swim meets and swim and track, which don't seem as foreign as they do at some other schools at Harvard. And did fencing once, and so yeah, there's certainly been I don't know what the exact number is, but a bunch of them going down the list at especially at a place like Harvard where their athletic program is so large and they just have so much stuff that it allows you kind of a chance to, the way they divvy up the games, it gives you a chance to do some random different things that you might not have expected, and it's led to now doing some stuff there. I've done the Ivy League track championships for the last couple of years, which is certainly not a sport I expected to call, though I did run it in high school. Didn't run it quickly, but I did run it in high school. But so yeah, there's been some cool opportunities there to do a bunch of different things.
No squash?
No, squash is no commentators. So they have done squash broadcasts before, but I don't think we've done any with commentators at Harvard. But that's one of the only ones, I think.
How about BC hockey, basketball?
Yeah, so basketball, hockey, basketball, the men most of the non-conference games, the women most of the games. Hockey, it's sort of BC's in a weird place where they have this ACC deal, but obviously the ACC doesn't have hockey, so that goes in a little bit of a different place. But Hockey East has a deal with, they show a bunch of games on NSMA and stuff, so that's been fun. But then also, your baseball and softball and soccer and women's lacrosse, where they have a great women's lacrosse team, and field hockey, and field hockey. We had a great year this year.
As you look back and say Jim Nantz Award, if you were to encapsulate what it did for you, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's certainly the, like you said, there's certainly having it on the resume. There's certainly, the doors that it opens up just by going to an event like the NSMA, and you don't know who that's going to lead to, and the people you get to meet, both really, really famous people and maybe people who aren't quite as famous but might help you even more. There's that nice balance of it, and all of that is certainly in the seminar, and all that's certainly true. But I really remember the takeaway of just, and I'm not even sure this was just the winning, but just being on there was just kind of the, you think you're doing a good job in college, and there's a ton of opportunities, especially to, a place like Syracuse, but the kind of reassurance that your work stacks up, and that doesn't mean that you're going to get any specific job, and it doesn't mean that you're going to make it, whatever that means, in 1 year or 5 years or 10 years, but that's kind of a scary time where you go into the world, and especially now where it's even harder to find jobs, and job means a different thing, and you kind of have to grind and freelance and find games somewhere. But just to have that kind of reinsurance coming out that, like, okay, there's enough people out there, not just in my inner circle, who like my stuff, that, I think I may have a chance to do a good job at this for a long time. And I really think that coming out, and again, that wasn't even just the winning part of it. That was just, kind of being on that list with a bunch of other people around the country. I think that, that certainly stands out as kind of the big thing of just that beyond all the other things that it does bring.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.